On today's episode of the NASM CPT Podcast with me, Rick Richey, I explore how to understand different types of stretching. Now, first of all, we go through and we talk about the difference between mobility and flexibility because that's pretty big right now, and there are a lot of people that ask those questions, so I address that. Then we talk about different types of flexibility and the techniques that go along with it. Self-myofascial techniques, static stretching, active stretching, dynamic stretching as a form of functional flexibility. So we review all of those, what they mean, what they might look like, and how you can apply them to yourself and your clients. So make sure that you like, that you follow, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review. Now, here's the episode. Understanding different types of stretching.
You're listening to the NASM CPT Podcast with Rick Richey, winner of the Share Care Emmy Award for Social Storytelling and the official podcast of the National Academy of Sports Medicine.
Hey, y'all, and welcome to the NASM CPT Podcast. My name is Rick Richey, and I'm going to answer a question as I was looking through the questions I get asked, and I was like, oh, okay, I think I hit that one. I think I hit that one. And so I get all the way down to a question that was asked in February of 2021 by Jason A. Lewis. And I thought, well, let's answer this question. It says, hey, I'm struggling big time on stretching. Well, this will be a little too late if you were trying to study for your exam, but I realized that I missed it, so I'm swinging back around trying to address it. Struggling big time on stretching, flexibility. What is dynamic? What is static? What's the difference between these? Will you be doing a podcast on that anytime soon? No, I will wait years. It will be years before I discuss this, Jason, but here we are. So it's not going to help you out probably, but it may come in really handy for a lot of other people that are listening. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about stretching, flexibility, what is dynamic, what is static, one not addressed there, a couple that are not addressed there. I'm going to actually address. But first, let's talk about flexibility and mobility. And I think that's important because you hear a lot of people talk about flexibility and mobility, and oftentimes they're used interchangeably. And oftentimes that's okay when somebody doesn't have range of motion somewhere and they say that I don't have the flexibility to do it. That may be right. They may not have the mobility to do something because they don't have the flexibility to do something. So let's talk a little bit about those two things, and then we'll start breaking down some of the other component parts that exist. Now, flexibility is the ability of the soft tissues, and that's muscles primarily, but ligaments and tendons are going to be included in that. It's their ability to passively elongate or stretch. Now, sometimes I'll take passively out because there's also flexibility includes, there's different types of flexibility. There's passive flexibility and there's active, passive and active both. Well, a lot of times mobility will be seen as something that is a hindrance when it's done actively. But mobility tends to be more focused on the joint's ability to actively move through its range of motion. So I've got flexibility, which is oftentimes passive flexibility or active flexibility. Now there tends to be a shift towards looking at mobility as being active flexibility. But our active flexibility to move through its full range of motion is something that we want to do. And this can be challenged without, while you're looking at things like flexibility, we got to look at stability. We got to look at strength. So do you have the strength to move through a range of motion? And NASMs have been covering this content for years, really focusing on active and passive range of motion at a joint. And there are different types of flexibility techniques in the way that we instill those things. See, there was an Alabamaism that came out. I've been in New York for 20 years. I tried to say instill, and I said instill. And instill is something, those ILLELLEAL words, those get me every time. All right, let's talk about something kind of interesting, right? So when I was a lad, I was able to do the splits, center splits. I would do the front splits, and on both legs, I'd have my brother, my older brother, we'd take the school books and stack them up. And then I'd put my front foot on the school books and my brother would push me down. So it's like an inverted split. Can I do that anymore? No, the answer is no. I cannot come close to that anymore. You don't use it, you lose it, and it's been lost for a long time. Also, Jean-Claude Van Damme was big at the time, so I was definitely doing the center splits between chairs. That was a big deal. I had to work towards doing the Van Damme splits between chairs. But here's what's interesting. In the presidential fitness test, there was a sit and reach test where you take both of your feet, you put them in front of you. There's usually a box that they would measure this and test this. So you put your fingers on the box and then you lean forward and you would slide this this dial forward. And it would tell you how far past your feet that you were able to go, or how close to your feet without touching you were able to go. So you got a kind of like a positive or a negative number. Or if you could get to your toes, the bottom of your toes, that would be a neutral number. Well, I failed that miserably. Still being able to do the center splits, still being able to do an inverted, a hyper flexibility, deep split, front legs on both sides. But as soon as my legs came together and my feet were dorsiflexed, I had some real issues with my neural flexibility. Now, that's not something we're going to spend time on really, but I will say this. When it comes to stretching your clients, I see a lot of people, they might stretch their clients and they put their leg on the shoulder and they lean forward and they pull on the knee to like squeeze the knee so it's locking their leg against their body, extending the knee fully. And then they reach up with this power clamp and grab the toes or the ball of the foot and just pull into dorsiflexion. I would scream my face off had somebody done that. Now, here's the thing. That's a nerve being stretched. And if you stretch a nerve, the first thing that's going to happen is that every single muscle surrounding the nerve, their job is to protect the nervous system. So they are going to increase tonicity to try to keep that from happening. So my question that I propose to you is, do you think that that will help flexibility or hinder flexibility? Because here's the thing, nerves don't like to be stretched. And so when people lock out someone's knee and then they pull into dorsiflexion, and some people can do it. I have several clients that are very flexible and it's still a nerve stretch for them, but it doesn't affect them. It's not a stretch like it is for me, where I will absolutely yelp. Now, the reason is when a nerve gets stretched, muscles lock down. Nerves don't like to be stretched, but they can do something. You can do something called neurodynamic stretching. Now, this is not something that is within the scope of practice for trainers to do, but I think it's important that we know it's real, we know it exists, and that we can also cue people to do a couple of things that does affect the nerves, because and every movement affects the nerves. Every movement involves it. It's just putting pressure on nerves is a big, big, big no-no, and you got to be careful. You hurt somebody that way, definitely outside the scope of practice. You want to be real careful what you're doing. And also holding a static position, nerve stretch, nah, that's not going to fly. So just stay away from that. What I tend to have people do is if I do that, I'll get them in a nerve stretch and then I'll just actively have them dorsiflex and plantar flex. So they're going to pull their shoelaces, their toes towards their face, and then they're going to point their foot away. They're going to pull back and point their foot away. And I have them actively go through that. And we're going to get into what some active flexibility techniques look like. But this particular active movement is a neurodynamic stretch that I have people do actively. Now, we also have something, we used to call it SMR, which is self-myofascial release. And then we kept SMR and we changed it to self-myofascial rolling because it does seem that there's potentially not a technical release of a muscle that happens. And now we tend to label it SMT, so self-myofascial techniques, and there are different types of techniques. Generally, we will go into the technique, which is a static myofascial technique where you're just on a foam roller. You find a spot that's achy, you find a spot that's a bit tender. As long as it doesn't pulse, numb, tingle, or shoot, you're probably in a decent place. You can stay on that spot and let that muscle relax. You hold it for about 30 seconds, allow autogenic inhibition to take place, and then that muscle should relax. It almost feels like it's melting on top of the roller. So that's a good technique that can be used. There are active versions of self-myofascial techniques that you can do as well. It's like a pin and stretch, which is a very good technique that I use as a massage therapist too, where I'll pin a muscle and stretch it with my hands. This, you're able to do it on a roller. It's a great technique, something that can be implemented with you as a trainer coaching your clients on how to do it. All right. This episode of the NASM CPT Podcast is brought to you by NASM One, the membership for trainers and coaches. Members enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of career resources. Get the Edge app to schedule and program clients. Enjoy half off all certifications, specializations, and free CEUs and more. All of this for just $35 a month. Go to nasm.org/membership to learn more about NASM One. So that first technique that we really talked about was self-myofascial techniques, foam rolling, and using things like a foam roller, using balls and different techniques that are different tools that are designed for foam rollers. Now, what I would avoid is anything with a client that isn't designed for self-myofascial rolling and self-myofascial techniques. For instance, this is kind of more of a legal thing than anything else. Immediately, if let's say you're using a softball, and I used to really love using softballs that are practice softballs, like training softballs, because they got a little bit of squish to them. But if anything happens that doesn't go well, and things can happen sometimes, and if that were to legally go to court or whatever it is, and the first question to ask is the tool that you use designed for doing what it is that you're trying to do? And you say the other side argues, no, it's a softball. It's designed to hit with a bat, not roll on your leg with. And then immediately, most likely sided for the other side. So I would definitely say if it's not designed for it, be real careful what you're using. They have plenty of things. Of course, it's going to mark it up. It's going to go up really high, but there are companies that have taken lacrosse balls, just labeled it as a self-myofascial technique tool. And then you can say, okay, yes, that's what the design of this is for. I would say just pay the extra and get something just for your safety that is marketed and designed with myofascial rolling in mind. Great. So now let's move on to static stretching. Static stretching is also going to use something called autogenic inhibition. It is where the receptors within the same muscle, are also they're causing them to tense up and they're causing them to relax. So what we do is we see this as a 30-second hold is generally what we get. So you've got the muscle spindle, the muscle gets stretched, and the muscle then tensions because it doesn't like speed of stretch, but it certainly doesn't like a certain amount of stretch. And your nervous system will gauge that in different ways, and that will change over time if you practice over time. So you pull into a stretch, and not cognizantly, but your muscle is just going to say, I don't go any further than that. Don't like it. I'm going to hold still. I'm going to lock it down. I'm going to contract. Well, if you hold for 30 seconds, that generally allows the Golgi tendon organ to measure the amount of tension and give it time to compute as to whether or not that is dangerous for you. And after about 30 seconds, usually the GTO goes, all right, we're good. We good. You can relax. And then the muscle relaxes. And then what do? Jerk. You go right deeper into a stretch. That's exactly right. You're going to go deeper into the stretch. The muscle spindle is going to be like, what? And then it's going to contract again. And you're going to wait 30 seconds. And hopefully the GTO is going to be like, all right, I think we're good. We're safe now. And then it's going to relax. And as soon as it does, you I can't believe you did it again. Yep, you're going to go deeper into that stretch. And that, my friends, is how you focus on increasing range of motion at a joint. My friends, this is what static stretching is designed to do. It is designed to increase range of motion at a joint. It is to increase that passive range of motion, your passive flexibility. Flexibility is an all-encompassing term that includes stretching, because self-myofascial techniques don't necessarily include stretching. You're just rolling on the roller. Rolling, rolling, rolling on the roller. So you're going to roll on that roller, and the muscle is going to go through autogenic inhibition, and it can help to increase range of motion. You've now become more flexible without stretching. So flexibility isn't always a stretch, but it does include stretching. It can include stretching. And specifically, if you want to increase range of motion, static stretching is the option that will be very beneficial. The purpose of it is to increase range of motion. I did not increase range of motion able to do the splits. I didn't do it by thinking about it. I didn't think myself into the splits. Wish that were an option. Because you could be like, I wish I could do the splits, and be like, what? There it is. No, I stretched a lot. I did a lot of static stretching, and there are a lot of different organizations out there that say you can increase range of motion without static stretching. And I'm like, yes, you can, but you won't be able to do the splits without static stretching. I don't know a single dancer or martial artist that has increased their range of motion by actively going into it. This is something that you really work on increasing range of motion at. Now, I will say this too. This is important to point out. Unless you're a martial artist or a dancer or all that stuff, you don't really need to increase your range of motion outside of what are considered the norms. And I'm not going to go through the norms chart and tell you what the ranges of motion are. I'm just going to say this, that if a muscle doesn't need to be stretched, then you don't really have to stretch it. If muscle doesn't need to be stretched, then that's not something that you need to focus static stretching on. If you don't need more range of motion, static stretching might be off the table for what it is that you're looking to do. However, active stretching, going into the next one, active stretching is something that's very important. I do active stretching series with the clients, and include some static stretching with clients almost every day. And one of those would be like, all right, well, we're going to focus on hip flexor active stretches or active flexibility. And what we do is, first of all, it uses the concept of reciprocal inhibition. So that's the muscle on one side is contracting to try to get the muscle on the other side to relax. So I might go into a kneeling hip flexor stretch and do a posterior pelvic tilt and squeeze my glute. And so my glute activation is leading to decreased iliopsoas activation. And so that reciprocal inhibition, something on one side inhibiting the thing on the other side. And usually you can hold for 1 to 2 seconds. Some research focuses on even longer times that you can do as well. And just do for 5, 8, 10 repetitions. And just tuck, hold that position, back up. Go right back into it. Tuck, squeeze the glute, hold for 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. And I know that a lot of times the Mississippis get thrown out. And also, if this goes for the static stretching as well, we look at 30 seconds. And a lot of y'all use the 1, 2, skip a few method to get to 30. You'll go into a stretch and be like, all right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 30. Good. And I know because my clients do it too. I watch my clients. They tend to be awful judges of how long 30 seconds is. 30 seconds flies by when it comes to their rest, and 30 seconds seems like absolute eternity when it comes to imams and when it comes to stretching. So with that being said, y'all hit a timer. Get your clients real used to hitting a timer. A lot of people have smartwatches. A lot of people, if they don't have smartwatches, got watches that show second hands on it, and just have them do the full 30 seconds for the static. Even if you feel like that muscle has relaxed, allow for the full 30 seconds to take place. And then you can move into the active flexibility. Now, what I like about active stretching as a flexibility technique is that it focuses on giving strength to your newfound range of motion. So let's say I've been doing that hamstring stretch we talked about in static stretching. Well, great. But if you don't use it, especially you don't use it actively, then you tend to lose it. So, how do you use it actively? Well, what I might be doing is a kneeling hamstring stretch where I put a leg out in front of me. My left leg's in front of me. I'm on the knee of my right leg and I'm stretching. And I'm doing that passively, 30 seconds. Well, how do I actively stretch that? Well, you can lie back on your back and you can pull your knee towards your chest, hold the hip at a 90-degree angle, and then just actively extend your knee as far as you can extend it. That is an active stretch for your hamstring. That's an active stretch for your hamstring. You can do it while standing. You can do a straight leg raise, which is active stretch for your hamstrings, or you can go to a 90-degree bend at the hip and then work on trying to build up to a full extension at your knee. And these are all excellent ways that we can try to build active flexibility. And there are all sorts of active stretching techniques that are listed in your textbook. So if you want to explore what those are, then go back to the book and you can check out more when it comes to active stretching. Now, the last thing on that list is functional flexibility. Now, functional flexibility is just really your ability to be functional in your movement because the range of motion is there. Well, that includes mobility. So, one great example of functional flexibility, squats. Well, do you have the mobility to go into that range of motion? Do you have the flexibility to go into it? So, functional flexibility, can I do squats? Can I do lunges? Can I do push-ups? Can I do an overhead press? All of these things where if you get somebody and it's hard for them to straighten. I had trained one of my guys today, very, very tight in his shoulders, a big mobility issue, but some flexibility issues as well. Can't take his arm straight up over his head. So we work on what's going on with the tissues surrounding. Now, mobility is more what's going on at the joint. Does it roll? Does it spin? Does it glide? And I don't see what's happening with him as a mobility issue. It's really a lot about whether or not he can go through that. And I'll test it actively. I test it passively. They are both equally atrocious. So let's focus on building range of motion, allowing the arm to go overhead by self-myofascial techniques to the lats and to the pecs, to the teres major, and then stretching. And then we practice actively trying to get it overhead. That's why we look at this as a continuum, a flexibility continuum. Now, there is a type of stretching specifically under functional flexibility, and that is called dynamic stretching. And dynamic stretching are the stretches that you might see a lot of people doing, let's say before they go for a run, right? They're doing straight leg swings. They're swinging their leg, one leg at a time, swinging it in front of them, doing real dynamic hamstring flexibility. It is active range of motion along with momentum. So we're using momentum to swing an appendage through its range of motion. So the appendicular skeleton, and we can see that with arm swings, right? We got arm swings. We go across the body. We go up and down. We see people doing circles. We see people doing straight leg swings. We see them in the frontal plane doing swings across the midline of the body and then out to the side where the toes tend to point up. That's all different types of dynamic stretching. And with these types of stretching, we are able to get our body used to more sports-like activities. Now, does that mean that you can't do static stretching before a sporting activity? I would say if you have any clinically tight muscles, you should be doing static stretching leading up to it. But if you're going into a high velocity exercise like sprinting, then I'm always including dynamic stretching with that, right? A lot of times you'll see the corrective flexibility, static stretching, and SMR, SMT, listed as a corrective version. So if you're working on the corrective strategies with people, then you're going to do the corrective version of flexibility, SMR, SMT, so self-myofascial techniques, and static stretching. As you go into your strength training, you're going to do the flexibility that includes strength training. That's the active type of stretching because it does two things. If I'm doing, let's say, that hip flexor stretch, I'm increasing range of motion for my hip flexor, but I'm also getting the glute active, ready to go do some squats or some lunges. And then the functional flexibility, specifically type of technique, we're looking at dynamic stretching, where I might be doing leg swings, I might be doing knee hugs, I might be doing butt kicks. All of those are dynamic stretches that are active flexibility using momentum as well. All right, y'all. Thanks for listening. And thanks to our producer, Eric Sorensen. I'd like to ask if please like, subscribe, share with your fitness friends and family, and leave a 5-star review. If you want to reach out to me like this guy did 3 years ago, 4 years ago, hit me up. You can do so on Instagram at dr.rickricchey or email me, rick.richey@nasm.org. Y'all keep inspiring people to fitness. Thanks for listening. This has been the NASM CPT Podcast.